The history of Black Hebrews in Africa is a complex and fascinating narrative that intertwines ancient traditions, religious migrations, and cultural influences. The Black Hebrews, also known as African Hebrews or Hebrew Israelites, trace their spiritual and ancestral lineage back to the ancient Israelites, suggesting that the presence of Hebrew traditions in Africa stretches back thousands of years. This historical journey traverses periods of migration, religious evolution, and cultural amalgamation, revealing a rich and diverse tapestry of African communities who have maintained Hebrew beliefs, practices, and identity throughout the centuries. The narrative begins in the ancient world, where the Israelites emerged as a distinct people in the Near East. According to biblical tradition, the Israelites are descendants of the patriarch Jacob, who was later named Israel. The tribes of Israel settled in the land of Canaan, which corresponds to modern-day Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, and parts of Jordan and Syria. Throughout their early history, the Israelites experienced several pivotal moments of conquest, enslavement, and exile, events that would eventually lead to the migration of some of their members into Africa. One of the earliest significant moments in the history of Black Hebrews in Africa is the Exodus, as described in the Hebrew Bible. The Israelites, led by Moses, are said to have fled from Egypt, escaping bondage under the pharaohs. While the primary narrative of the Exodus suggests a return to Canaan, there are traditions and accounts that hint at groups of Israelites remaining in Africa, particularly in Egypt and other regions of North Africa. The Jewish presence in Egypt continued to thrive well into the Hellenistic and Roman periods, with Jewish communities playing important roles in the religious and intellectual life of cities like Alexandria. As time progressed, migrations of Jewish and Israelite groups into the heart of Africa became more pronounced. Some scholars point to the destruction of the First and Second Temples in Jerusalem as key events that triggered further dispersal of Israelites, many of whom sought refuge in different parts of Africa. In particular, the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE led to the diaspora, where Jews scattered across various parts of the world, including North Africa, West Africa, and even into the Sahel and sub-Saharan regions. This movement of Israelites into Africa laid the groundwork for the development of distinct Black Hebrew communities. One of the most significant and well-documented communities of Black Hebrews in Africa is the Beta Israel, or Ethiopian Jews. The Beta Israel community has long claimed descent from the Israelite tribe of Dan, one of the 10 lost tribes of Israel. According to their tradition, they have maintained their Jewish faith and identity since the time of the First Temple. Ethiopian Jews followed practices that were similar to ancient Hebrew rituals, including observing the Sabbath, dietary laws, and circumcision. Their religious texts, such as the Orit, the Ethiopian Torah, were written in Ge'ez, an ancient Semitic language. The Beta Israel's historical connection to Judaism has been a subject of fascination and debate, particularly among European Jews and Christian missionaries who encountered them during the colonial period. In the 20th century, the Beta Israel community's long-standing connection to Judaism was recognized by the State of Israel, leading to mass migrations to Israel in operations such as Moses and Solomon during the 1980s and 1990s. The Lemba people of southern Africa are another remarkable group who claim Hebrew ancestry. The Lemba, living in modern-day Zimbabwe and South Africa, have traditions that trace their origins back to ancient Israel. Genetic studies conducted in recent decades have provided some support for the Lemba's claims, revealing markers consistent with those found in Jewish populations. According to their oral traditions, the Lemba's ancestors were Jews who migrated from a place called Senna, possibly located in present-day Yemen, before crossing into Africa. They brought with them practices such as circumcision, kosher dietary laws, and ritual slaughter, which bear striking similarities to Jewish customs. The Lemba have maintained these practices over centuries, even as they integrated into the broader African cultural context. In West Africa, the presence of Black Hebrews has also been noted, particularly among the Igbo people of Nigeria. The Igbo have long held oral traditions that connect them to ancient Israel, with many identifying as part of the lost tribes of Israel. In the late 20th century, the Igbo Jewish community emerged more prominently, as many Igbo began to embrace Jewish religious practices and identify as Hebrew Israelites. Though their historical connection to ancient Israel is difficult to trace definitively, the Igbo Jewish community has maintained a vibrant religious life, complete with synagogues, Torah study, and observance of Jewish holidays. The modern Igbo Jewish movement represents a revival of a long-standing tradition that blends indigenous African spiritual beliefs with Jewish customs and Hebrew identity. The spread of Black Hebrew traditions in Africa has also been influenced by the transatlantic slave trade. During the era of slavery, millions of Africans were forcibly taken from the continent and transported to the Americas. Among the enslaved Africans, there were individuals and groups who identified as Hebrews or Israelites, carrying with them the religious traditions and cultural practices of their communities. In the Americas, these Black Hebrews found themselves in new and often hostile environments, but they adapted their beliefs to the realities of slavery and resistance. This led to the formation of religious movements such as the African Hebrew Israelites of Jerusalem, who emerged in the 20th century as part of the broader African American religious experience. The African Hebrew Israelites of Jerusalem, often referred to as the Black Hebrews, were founded by Ben Ami ben Israel in Chicago in the 1960s. Inspired by the belief that African Americans were descendants of the ancient Israelites, Ben Ami led a group of followers on a migration to Israel in the late 1960s, settling in the town of Dimona. The community established itself as a self-sustaining society, practicing a lifestyle that adhered to their interpretation of biblical principles. Over the decades, the African Hebrew Israelites of Jerusalem have gained recognition as a religious community in Israel, contributing to the ongoing conversation about the role of Black Hebrews in the global Jewish community. In addition to these historical and contemporary communities, the concept of Hebrew identity has also been embraced by other African religious movements. In South Africa, the rise of the Zionist Christian Church, a syncretic faith blending Christianity with African traditions, incorporates Hebrew symbolism and elements of Israelite identity. Similar movements across Africa have invoked the legacy of the Israelites, seeing themselves as part of a spiritual lineage that stretches back to the Hebrew patriarchs. The history of Black Hebrews in Africa reflects a deep and enduring connection between the continent and the ancient traditions of the Israelites. From the Ethiopian Jews to the Lemba, Igbo, and modern Hebrew Israelite movements, these communities have maintained a sense of identity and continuity, even as they adapted to the diverse cultural and historical context of Africa. Their story is one of resilience, spiritual devotion, and the blending of African and Hebrew heritage, creating a rich tapestry that continues to evolve in the modern era.